Shabbat Shalom and welcome. We are coming to you from our beautiful sanctuary. I am Rabbi Javier Carapan and I am joined by our musicians and our technical team. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, you can find links to the pages and other information for this service in the comments line. There will be prayer book pages there. If you're watching us on the virtual sanctuary, the link to the PDF is above the player, and all other links are in your e-news. Thank you special to our digital docents who are managing our streaming. If you're watching us on Facebook Live and would like to say hi by typing Shabbat Shalom in the comments line, please do so and don't forget to hit return. If you have feedback about our services today, we invite you to take some notes and email us next week with comments. We thank you in advance for that. And finally, if you have any technical difficulties and need help, we invite you to reach out to CBT's Technical Assistance Line TAL at 913-303-1134. Please text the number and a docent will call you as soon as possible. Again, welcome to our Shabbat morning service. And we invite you to now turn to page 288 as we thank God for bringing us to this moment as we sing the words of Modeh Ani.
מלך חי וקיים, שהחזרת בי נשמתי, לכם רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך.
We join together on page 291. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר יצר את האדם בחוכמה וברא בו נקבים נקבים חלולים חלולים גלוי וידוע לפני כיסא כבודך שאם ייפתח אחד מהם או יסתם אחד מהם אי אפשר להתקיים ולעמוד לפניך. ברוך אתה אדוני רופא כל בשר ומפליא לעשות.
אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא, אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא, אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא, טהורה היא, אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא, אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה היא.
On page 293 together we join in reciting the blessings for our daily miracles Nisim Bechol Yom.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך מלך העולם, אשר נתן לשך ובינה להכווין בין יום ובין לילה.
אמן. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, פוקח עברי.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, מתיר אסורים.
אמן. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, זוקף כפופים.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, רוקע הארץ על המים.
אמן. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, המכין מצעדי גבר.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, מלביש ערומים.
אמן. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, הנותן ליהב כוח.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המעביר שינה מעיני ותנומה מעפעפי.
אמן. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשני בצלם אלוהים.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשני בת חורין.
אמן. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשני ישראל.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוזר ישראל בגבורה.
אמן. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוטר ישראל בתפארה.
Amen.
In the middle of page 302, we join together in Tzadik Katamar.
Tzadik Katamar Ivra, Ke'eretz Balanon Malvanon Yizge, Shetuli Lebeit Adonai, Echazot Eloheinu Yafridu, Od Yenuvon Beseva, Vesheni Behananiyu, Lehagi, Ki Yashar Adonai, Tzuri Velo Avnat Avot.
On page 317, 306, 306. Hallelujah.
Indeed.
Hallelujah. 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 On page 317, we prepare for the recitation of the Shema by together joining in the blessings before on page 317, and then we'll go directly into 318 and 319. O God, inspiration and guide for all, you have spoken in 1,000 tongues for us to hear. In every land and every age, your children have heard you and imagined you in separate ways. And yet, O God, you are one, unifier of humanity. We give thanks for the sages and teachers who bring us understanding of your will. Gratefully we recall the lawgivers and prophets, the psalmists and sages of Israel, and joyfully we remember that from the dawn of Israel's life we would turn to you and find purpose. May the teachings of our ancestors live on in our minds, and their passion for righteousness stir our hearts. Help us to live so that our daily conduct reveals the beauty and wisdom of your truth.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu amo Yisrael be'ahava. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Emet. On page 322, together we join in the words of Mi Hamocha.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, תורה תהילות, אוסף דלת, שירה חדשה שירו גאונים. לשמך על שפתיה, יחד כולם הודו, והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני אלוהינו לעולם ועד. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, תורה תהילות, אוסף דלת, אוסף דלת.
As we prepare for our Amidah, we invite you to begin with us together on page 322 with Sur Israel, then 323, and then continue silently through page 337. You may also take this moment for a meditation, a silent prayer, a time of reflection. I was just thinking how beautiful our background is. It's been changing colors, and it's even a different color. And the sky is so blue. ארצת ישראל, ובני קדומך, יהודה וישראל, אוהלינו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
Adonai sefetai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
Service for the reading of the Torah begins on page 367 with Al Shlosha Dvarim.
Al Shlosha Devarim, Al Shlosha Devarim, Al Shlosha Devarim, Haolam omer.
חסדים, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, העולם עומד. Just want to remind everybody that we have a link for the reading for this week. We will be reading from the Haftarah for Parashat Vayera, and that will be from the second book of Kings, chapter 4, verses 1 through 23. Now, this week's Torah portion is fairly well known, and the reason for that is that it is a couple of the chapters from this Torah portion are read every year on Rosh Hashanah. If you grew up or attended a conservative or more traditional congregation, the chapter on the birth of Isaac, the Annunciation of Isaac, as well as the chapter of the binding of Isaac, Akedat Yitzchak, are both read during Rosh Hashanah, one on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and if you have a second day, then you read the second. In our Machzor, the one that we are currently using, we have both readings now. And this year we read the Akedah, but last year we read the story of Hagar and Sarah. If you may recall, Rabbi Kleiman spoke about that and had a message about Hagar and all that. So this past year was about the Akedah. So this is a very well-known story. The other stories included in this week's Torah portion is, of course, the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah, also very well-known, and Lot and all that. So I decided that perhaps, since we've read so much of Vayera throughout the years, and we're not doing both Torah and Haftorah on the Shabbat mornings, that we will concentrate on the Haftarah this morning. And I think the Haftarah sometimes is directly connected to the Torah and sometimes is not. And when the Haftarah is directly connected to the Torah reading, in rare occasions, it's actually an interpretation or an expansion of the Torah portion. And that is actually the case this particular occasion with the Haftarah for Vayera. So what is the Haftarah for Vayera? It is basically the story of the prophet Elisha, and some of you may know the prophet Elijah. Now, in English, to me, it always sounds confusing because it's hard for me to hear the J and the Sh as different letters.
Is it the same? Elisha and Elijah, are they the same or are they different?
No, in Hebrew are totally different. That's why in Hebrew I have no problem.
Gotcha.
Because you know what Elijah is in Hebrew. Eliyahu. So everybody knows Eliyahu and Elisha. So Eliyahu and Elisha don't really sound that much alike to me.
No, they don't sound like
But Elisha and Elijah, I get confused. But this is the story about Elisha, who was actually, and this is part of the confusion too, a disciple of Elijah. Eliyahu. So in the stories that are contained in this Haftarah, it's a series of what people will call maybe the miracles that Elisha performed. And the first one is one about the multiplication of oil. Now, I know what you're thinking, or should be thinking, right? This sounds like another guy whose name begins with J. It's no coincidence. A lot of the stories, especially of Elisha, are really connected to some of the stories in the New Testament. And you'll see, because the next story is about the birth of a child. And now, we are not reading the end of the story, but the end of the story includes the resurrection of that child. And if you read the story of Lazarus and all that, if anybody's familiar with that, here again, so we have multiplication of food, and we have birth from a barren woman, and then the death of that child, and then the resurrection of that child by Elisha.
Yes, because it was eating oil, not burning oil, right? That was
Correct.
multiplied.
This is eating. Well, they could have been using for anything else. So those are the stories that are part of the Haftarah. And you may wonder, well, how is that either connected to the Torah portion or an interpretation of the Torah portion? First, I think that in both cases, the Torah and Haftorah have these tales of wonders that might have circulated among ancient people in the time of the prophets. And they include this story, but it also includes, although it's not exactly found in the same sections of the Hebrew Bible, the stories of like the miraculous birth of Isaac, because that is part of the Torah portion. Sarah is barren and she's very old, and visitors come to her home and they say, a year from now you will be giving birth to a child. Excuse me. And that actually is the precise, and this we don't find this a lot, the precise connection between the two sections. And it's not just on the theme. I'm now reading from the Etz Chaim commentary, which is the JPS commentary. It says, in the parasha, Abraham is at Mamre and extends hospitality to 3 unexpected visitors. Immediately thereafter, he receives the divine promise that at the same season, La Moed, next year, Ka'et Chaya, the barren Sarah will have a child. In the Haftarah, we find exactly the same words. The wealthy woman of Shunem provided food and lodging for Elisha, and then he says, La Moed Hazeh, next year, Ka'et Chaya, you will be embracing a son. Almost as if Elisha knows his Torah and he's quoting it back. I am sure he knows his Torah, and I'm sure he's quoting it back.
Almost exactly.
And I am sure that Elisha knows that when he's doing this, he is really saying, I am like those messengers that came to Sarah, and I'm coming now to you. So there is a clear linguistic connection between the two. But the more deeper connection is about the themes of both the Torah and the Haftorah. And I know, again, that we have a lot of topics in the story of Parashat Vayera. But 2 of the stories that are central to Vayera are really about one mitzvah, the mitzvah of Hachnasat Orchim, which is hospitality.
Okay.
That is the theme of Sodom and Gomorrah. I know all we know about, and there have been many sermons preached, what are called brimstone and fire
and brimstone. Fire and brimstone, yeah.
Certainly not disagreeing with that. But the mitzvah for which Lot is exalted in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is that he welcomes these visitors to Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right, yes.
So we have Hachnasat Orchim there. And of course, in the story of the main story of Vayera, which is the birth, almost miraculous birth of Isaac, we also have there Hachnasat Orchim. And this is actually the main text that the rabbis use to teach Hachnasat Orchim, hospitality, because although there is no statement that says that the birth of Isaac is a reward for hospitality, in the Haftarah, this is made clear. The wealthy woman of Shunem, who had provided food and lodging for Elisha, they ask her, what can we do for you? And as a reward to her hospitality, the son is born and then resurrected. So there it's very clear. So when I said at the very beginning that the Haftarah is an interpretation of the Torah portion, is that the Haftarah makes clear that the most central mitzvah in the Torah portion is achnasat orchim,
The hospitality.
hospitality. And I think that we in the modern world have a difficult time with this kind of mitzvah. Not so much that we are not hospitable, but many of us have cameras now, have kinds of things at home. We just let anybody come in, like Abraham might have, or like in the story of Elisha. Although the lady in Shunem was a wealthy woman, and she knew that Elisha was an important person, but she was under no obligation to give him lodging and to be hospitable to him. And maybe there is actually more clear. With Abraham, you may say, well, Abraham is right there in the middle of the desert. And, he may think, maybe a visitor is a good idea. But the woman of Shunem had no obligation. She did not need anything from anybody. She was truly, and I think in some of these stories, when a wealthy person does something, it's a way of saying they don't have to, but they do it, and they do it because this is what they feel it's a mitzvah. Mm-hmm. So in her case, she welcomed him, and she got rewarded. And this idea to be welcoming to the stranger, it's the same as part of this hospitality. We're not just saying, okay, well, strangers are welcome as long as they don't come too close to us. The idea here is achnasat orchim is really, I think, a challenge. It was then a challenge, and it still continues to be a challenge, because that means that we have to trust a stranger and bring them into our homes. And I think we all struggle with that. But the Torah is clear that it is an essential mitzvah and an important commandment for us to continue to strive doing even today. So as I mentioned, we will be reading the Haftarah. And on page 372, I invite you to join us in the chanting of the blessings before the Haftarah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar bנביאים טובים ורצה ודבריהם הנאמרים באמת. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בתורה ובמשה עבדו ובישראל עמו ובנביאי האמת והצדק.
Amen.
A certain woman, the wife of one of the disciples of the prophets, cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know how your servant revered Adonai. And now a creditor is coming to seize my 2 children as slaves." Elisha said to her, "What can I do for you? Tell me, what have you in the house?" She replied, "Your maidservant has nothing at all in the house except a jug of oil." "Go," he said, "and borrow vessels outside from all your neighbors, empty vessels, as many as you can. Then go in and shut the door behind you and your children, and pour oil into all those vessels, removing each one as it is filled." So she went away and shut the door behind her and her children. They kept bringing vessels to her, and she kept pouring. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." He answered her, "There are no more vessels." And the oil stopped. She came and told the man of God, and he said, "We go sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your children can live on the rest. That's the first story. One day, Elisha visited Shunem. A wealthy woman lived there, and she urged him to have a meal, and whenever he passed by, he would stop there for a meal. Once she said to her husband, I am sure it is a holy man of God who comes this way regularly. Let us make a small and closed upper chamber and place the bed, a table, a chair, and a lampstand there for him, so that he can stop there whenever he comes to us. One day he came there. He retired to the upper chamber and lay down. He said to his servant Gehazi, call the Shunammite woman. And he called her, and she stood before him. He said to him, tell her, you have gone to all this trouble for us. What can we do for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or to the army commander? She replied, I live among my own people. What then can be done for her? He asked. The fact is, said Gehazi, she has no son, and her husband is old. Call her, he said. He called her, and she stood in the doorway, and Elisha said, at this season, next year, you will be embracing a son. She replied, please, my lord, man of God, do not delude your maidservant. The woman conceived and bore a son at the same season the following year. And as Elisha had assured her, the child grew up. One day he went out to his father among the reapers. Suddenly he cried to his father, oh, my head, my head. And he said to a servant, carry him to his mother. He picked him up and brought him to his mother. And the child sat on her lap until noon, and he died. She took him up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and left him and closed the door. Then she called to her husband, please send me one of the servants and one of the she-asses, so I can hurry to the man of God and back. But he said, why are you going to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. She answered, it's all right. And the end of the story is that he comes back and revives him. The blessings after the Haftarah are on page 372. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Sur Kol HaOlamim Tzadik Bechol HaDorot Hael HaNe'eman HaOmer VeOseh HaMdaber UMekayem Shekol Devarav Emet VaTzedek על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Amen.
As we gather together on this Shabbat, we read all these stories of healing. This is what sometimes they're also called. This is Elisha and Elijah and their stories of healing. So if we keep that in mind, we think about all the healing that many of us need. Those among us who are ill, we have a list, of course, as always. You may access that list through the comments. If you also like to share names at this moment, we invite you to type them on the comments so we can all see them. So please go ahead and type and join us on page 371 for the Mi Shebeinu. מאזיני אחיי, with רפואה שלמה, the renewal of body, the renewal of all spirit, and let us say, Service for the reading of the Torah and the Haftarah concludes on page 374 with Etz Chaim. As we prepare for our moment of remembrance, we invite you to turn to page 593. The light of life is a finite flame. Like the Shabbat candles, life is kindled, it burns, it glows, and is radiant with warmth and beauty. But soon it fades, its substance is consumed, and it is no more. In light we see, in light we are seen. The flames dance and our lives are full, but as night follows day, the candle of our life burns down and gutters. There is an end to the flame. We see no more and are no more seen. Yet we do not despair, for we are more than a memory, slowly fading into the darkness. With our lives we give life. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and death, of light and life. If you're joining us on this Shabbat and remembering a loved one, we invite you to type their names in the comments. On this Shabbat, we are observing the Yortzites, the following members of our congregation: Betty Abelson, Philip Abelson, Norman Altman, Doris Applebaum, Larry Beckerman, Estelle Bloom, Otto J. Carter, Sasha Paris Cohn, Rosalind Cohn, Lillian Effelbaum, Lucille Ellis, Sam Fassbinder, Meyer Franklin, Magda Fried, Harriet Waronsky, Margaret Gersh, Stanford Gilgas, Howard Jacobs, Ellen F. Kenyon, Sigmund Kaufman, Jack Levine, Margaret Viola Picora, Eugene Rubin, Viola Schmidt, Ron Schaffran, Rose M. Smith, David Stutna, Nathan Weiner, Robert Worthy. Zichronam Livracha, may the memories be for a blessing. Page 598, together we join in Kaddish Yatom, the mourners' Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba, be'alma divra chirute ve'amlich malchute, bechayechon u'v'mechon, u'v'chayei dechol beit Israel, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabba mevarach li'alam u'li'almei almaya, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תוש בחתה ונחמתה דא אמירם ועלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו amen. We have some announcements before we depart. First, we'd like to thank everyone who's joined us from our area and from around the world. Thanks especially to Leslie Zucker, our tech team, and everybody here for wonderful service. As you might have heard, we may actually have a new president, so Mazel Tov.
Mazel Tov.
One Jewish connection to
Yes.
this is not only we're going to have the first female vice president, we're going to have the first, I don't know how they're going to call them.
Jewish adjacent?
Jewish first gentleman. I don't know what they're going to call him. So that would be an interesting thing. We didn't get a Jewish vice president. Lieberman did not make it, but we have the closer thing. Our next Erev Shabbat service will be Friday, November the 13th at 6:30 p.m. and will include a remembrance of Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass. Rabbi Monica Kleiman will share her family's story on that shattering night. Join us or me for lunch and learn this Thursday. Lunch with the Rabbi is at noon on November the 12th. Please find the Zoom link in the e-news if you would like to join us, or you can also contact the office during the week and we'll send you the link.
I could do that announcement. It's so much more amusing this way. Midweek song session is back on Wednesday, November the 11th at 7 o'clock. Facebook Live and the Virtual Sanctuary, and Randy Deitch will be back with me, and we will also be doing a couple of songs in remembrance of Kristallnacht in addition to our regular stuff. Hanukkah, Hanukkah, come light the menorah. I bet you don't believe it, but it's right around the corner. I practiced my rhyme from last night. If you watched last night, it wasn't so good. But we have good news. Even though it's right around the corner, you can get your candles. We are selling assorted Hanukkah candles curbside, so you can call the office or email Tara and order them, and then just drive up and pick them up. We will arrange that with you. And finally, if you're not receiving our e-news where all of this information and so much more resides, please let us know and we can get you added to the list.
Thank you very much, everybody. And our closing prayer today is, the last page is Elu Dvarim. And one of the reasons we picked it is because it has the mitzvah of Achnasat Orchim in the middle, which is translated here, dealing graciously with guests. So I like that it's more than hospitality. You also have to be nice to them.
Exactly, I like that.
אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, ואלו הם כיבוד אבהם, וגמילות חסדים, והשכמת בית המדרש, שחרית וערבית. אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, ואלו הם בהכנסת אורחים וביקור חולים, בהכנסת כלה ולוויית המת, ועיון תפילה, ועיון תפילה, ואהבת שלום בין אדם לחברו, ותלמוד תורה כנגד כולם, 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 ותלמוד תורה כנגד כולם. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom. Take care of each other out there. Mwah.